Welcome to the podcast, Vanessa. I'm so excited to have you. I am so excited for you to share your incredibly inspiring story and journey. So, as we're getting started, I'd love for you to share as much as you're comfortable sharing about your journey. Because one of the things that I really love about it is the whole fact that you really connected with a spirit baby before and you had some pretty amazing things happen. So I found your story to be incredibly inspiring. And I know that a lot of people hearing it are going to feel the same. So,
Yeah.
welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's so nice to sit down and kind of recap our journey together. And like you said, anything that could help someone else going through this, I would love to do that and share. So let's do that.
Yes. So one of the things that I found so inspiring about your story was really not just like we're going to talk about really everything, but the fact that you had really very significant signs right before your pregnancy. And then just kind of by the way, one of the women in the group was actually, I don't know if you know this, but it was very inspired by your story and really everything that happened, also like your way of healing yourself with
Hmm.
meditation and some of the things that you've been doing really, which first of all was so amazing because I often suggest this to a lot of people, but not everybody takes it and embodies it the way you did. But of course, it took you time to get into new habits and everything. So I know it's a long journey, but if you can kind of like talk about really your story and how you got to the place that you're at now.
So I was introduced to you through a very good friend. I think at one point you called her, like we had a soul sister connection.
Hmm.
So she introduced me to you after her journey, and I immediately made an appointment. I remember it was in October, and October of like the previous year. So think of 24, possibly,
24? Yeah.
possibly. And because I had all my notes of our first conversation, and I remember I told you, like, this is where I'm at, this is my goal, I'm trying to get pregnant. I had seen a few doctors at that point. Besides my regular OB, I had gone to do testing for endometriosis since I was diagnosed in my early 30s. Even though I had symptoms for quite some time, I wasn't the type of patient that it would immediately dictate, like, this is endo. But I did
Hmm.
have a few complaints, and I actually ended up switching doctors, and my current doctor immediately knew, hey, I think you have this. So we did the proper testing to diagnose, and I knew that going into my journey. And when you and I met, I told you, this is what we found. I was told, I might have difficulty getting pregnant. At that point, I had actually done acupuncture for other reasons, including fertility, but for other reasons, like for stress, and I had messed up my neck as well. So I had already had a good relationship with acupuncture, but not for what I was trying to accomplish at this time. So we met, we talked, and I immediately started implementing like the diet changes you had told me about, things like that. And it took us some time. I know you said you always recommend like meditation and certain things that you always guide us to. And it took me a little bit. I know every time we would talk, you'd be like, are you meditating? And I was like, I'm working on it. I think that was the hardest part for me. And it was just the way my mind worked. It was very hard to
Hmm.
quiet my thoughts. That was one of
Hmm.
the most challenging things. Doing everything else that we talked about, like diet change, I was like, no problem. Very
Hmm.
type A. I made my list, like, okay, we're going to swap this out, do this. Exercise is always a part of my life. So that wasn't an issue, but all the other things that you told me to do were easy. The meditation was the hardest part. And when I knew when we were going to have this conversation, I'll get more into detail as we continue the conversation, but there was something that tied into that finally made me understand why you guided me and you kept like reminding me to do it. But I think, in my journey, and I think when you're listening to this, I know it resonates with many that there's ups and downs. Like there's moments you feel really motivated. You're like, let's do this. Yeah. And then there's other times where you're sad and you feel unmotivated, and that's totally normal. We definitely went through that. My husband and myself, he went and made changes as well to his lifestyle. I know we had talked about like he worked night shifts. He even switched to day shifts at some point. He thought like, what if that's the, contributing factor to why we're not getting pregnant? So there was a lot put in from both of us, definitely more from my side. But yeah, that kind of summarizes my journey a little bit.
Of course, I remember all the little details, so I'll kind of bring up. So talk about actually the chocolate cyst.
Yes. So when I did the diagnostic testing for the endo, I had always complained about this really sharp pain on my left ovary, particularly around ovulation. And I was told, it's like a little cyst that'll go away. But 2 years went by and it didn't go away. So I kept insisting. I switched doctors. And the moment my current doctor saw it, she said, 50-50, I think that's endometriosis. And she sent me to a specialist to test even further. It ended up being a little chocolate cyst. And it's funny that it was a really remarkable occurrence with that little chocolate cyst. So it kept growing over the years, little by little. And right when we started having our group calls, I had gone for my regular testing and they said,
Do you remember
so
the sizes?
I think I always get the measurements wrong, but it was like a 3.1 millimeter, really tiny.
And then afterwards it grew.
It had at its peak, it was about 3.1. Because I
Oh,
remember I
okay.
was sad at that point. It went from like a 2 something to a 3.1. And I remember feeling really sad because I'm like, oh, this is what they talked about, and this is what we see on the outside, but we don't know how it's affecting the ovary and the eggs within, which was always the concern that I would have a good egg count, but the quality would be compromised. So at the end, when I got the latest testing, right when we started our calls, I would say this is like early April of last year, it had dipped down to like a 1 point something. So I remember sitting in the
Mhm.
doctor's office and she said, this is wonderful news. It went down.
Mhm.
We can see it here. And this is great. Just continue doing what you're doing. And I was like, this is awesome. I know what I'm doing. I'm doing everything Michelle told me to do. This is what I'm doing. I really focused on like our protocol. So it was great that it had reduced that much because it had never done something like that. It had always grown a little bit.
So I'm not going to mention her name, but Jay, who
Hmm.
was on our call, had a very similar situation as you. And
Yeah.
she said just on our recent call that she was really inspired by her story.
Hmm.
And she was like, the fact that you also started meditating. Okay, so I'm going to get to that, which one thing I love about your story is about the realism aspect of it and how you're saying that it took a while for you to get into the meditation, that it was the hardest because it is. I often work with people on, and I'm always gentle about it. I just constantly ask them, are you meditating? Every time I
Hmm.
speak to them, whether it's like online or in person, I'm always asking that question. I'm very gentle about it because I'm like, okay, we'll get there. And because the point is, you're such a great example of that, of somebody who ended up getting into that,
Hmm.
but it took a little while. And your story, I feel like, is something that a lot of people relate to. It's not something that happens overnight. It's sometimes you need a couple of months to just think about meditating until it starts to become something that you're curious about and you start to try here and there until it starts to become something that you start to feel the benefits of. So I thought that was a really cool part of your story because I do feel like once you started to do that, you started to get more in tune with downloads, your intuition. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's how I remember it. So talk about that.
So I always had, let's call it intuition, a little bit of intuition that
Mhm.
you and I would always chat about ever since I was little. But what I ended up, you would always gently bring it up. And I love that about you. It was like a gentle reminder of like, hey, this would be nice for you to incorporate if you can. And I think what I had to ask myself was, how does this look for me? Because I was like, where do I start? What does this look like for me? Is it in the morning? Is it in the evening? Is it a few minutes when you're in the shower by yourself and it's like no one's bothering you, right? So I had to kind of accommodate that and define what that looked for me in my life. Once I figured that out, then it was easier. Then it was creating the boundary in the space, like making an appointment with myself where I would not get interrupted. 'Cause I remember telling you, like, I'll sit down and something happens and I always get interrupted. Creating that space for myself and then letting my husband know, if I need you to entertain the dog for a little bit, just so if I'm sitting by the window looking out, getting sun, trying to meditate, and he comes over, sometimes it's fine, but sometimes, like on the days that I was really, I just need a minute. Things like that where I created the space for myself helped. And once I started doing that, I would say it was over a couple months, the last couple months before I got pregnant, things started to flow better. Things were a bit more clear. There was one last step
Mhm.
after the meditation, which when we'll get there, I'll tell you. I do clearly remember this. And I felt that really had an important part in the process. But the meditation opened the gateway to getting there. There was one last step for
Mhm.
me. There's one last
Mhm.
step, but the meditation allowed me to get there.
Amazing. And I remember another thing that you did, which I thought was really, really powerful, was create boundaries.
Yeah.
And you started to do that at work, and you started to really prioritize your self-care
Hmm.
and also prioritize how you were feeling, like really tuning in with yourself when you knew this is it. This is too much for me, whether it's at work or being around people that were really nice, but just were too much energy for you
Right.
at the time. So
There's
talk about
another,
that because all of these things are really like I feel like are so relatable to so many people on the journey right now.
yes, we had a really good support system at work. There were a lot of girls going through similar situations that we just don't get used to talking about it, or sometimes there's shame around it because, for lack of a better word, you feel like you're failing. So luckily we had a really good friendships at work that when we sat down to talk about it, it was helpful. But in terms of based on what I do, it's very client demanding. And the clients, if you don't set boundaries, they do try to sometimes contact you via your cell phone. And like, sometimes it's 8 p.m. and they need something. So it was important for me for this season to create a little bit more of a boundary and be like, this isn't an emergency. Like, I will definitely get to you tomorrow. So that helped me in terms of work. Coming home and cooking, I missed cooking. It was something that I really liked to do. And another important thing that I did, I would say 4 months before I got pregnant, because that's how I kind of remember it in phases of like I did a little bit more and then a little bit more as the months got closer.
Mhm.
I really realized after seeing you, we would see each other pretty often that I wasn't doing the things that made me happy. I remember
Mhm.
one time
Yep.
leaving your office and it's drive back to my house and I was coming over the causeway and I was like, I'm not doing things that make me happy. I'm doing everything that needs to be done, but that
Mhm.
doesn't mean I'm doing things that make me happy. So it's like, what
Mhm.
makes you feel like a kid again? I remember having this conversation with myself. So I reached back out to my tennis coach and I started playing tennis again. So every Saturday morning, and my husband would work on weekends. So I would just take off and go play with them. It was one-on-one sessions and it was my same coaches. So it took me back to like my 20s when my husband and I had reconnected and we were just like kind of not even dating yet. And it was that phase in my life and I felt so happy. I remember driving over there, I felt happy. I remember feeling super happy on the way home. Things like that that I
Yeah.
really loved. And I remember someone told me like, "You always talk about tennis, but when was the last time you played?" And I'm like, "You're absolutely right. I
Mhm.
have not played in years, and that's a problem. So we're gonna fix
Yeah.
it." So I started
Yeah.
doing things like that of like, what makes me happy? Because I was doing everything in a type A personality way, like everything on the list. We're checking everything off, but what am I doing for myself? And I realized that I just internally I wasn't. And my husband is very good at that. My husband has always been the type of person to have really good boundaries. He knows his limits, but he's always continued to do things that make him happy in terms of like he gets his 1 hour workout in. He'll do like baseball leagues, and baseball is a big part of his life when he was a kid. And I would hear him talk about it, and I'm like, I don't have anything like that. Not anymore. So I definitely put an effort to correcting that.
Well, that's incredibly important. I think a lot of people shelve all the things that bring them joy because they feel like until I get this goal accomplished, I can't afford
Hmm.
to enjoy myself. But you almost can't afford to not enjoy yourself if you want to get that goal because I do personally feel like it's good for your fertility health to do
Yeah.
things that bring you joy, to really connect with your heart. And I remember actually a key thing, well, a couple of things. You had mentioned that you were afraid to exercise because you thought exercising too much would be harmful for fertility. And I
Hmm.
remember mentioning it depends on your body type because
Yeah.
sometimes certain bodies can handle it. If it gives you energy, I was like, does it give you energy? You said yes. I'm like, well, then it's not depleting you. And that was something that you also increased, or maybe it was part of tennis. But I remember another thing that I found really profound is that there was a point in your journey, and I love talking to you because it just shows people like your story that it's not a perfect journey. And
It's really
even what you were doing, nothing's perfect. You're kind of figuring things out. It's not like you're hitting all the points and doing everything like exactly right, the way
Mhm.
you quote unquote, there's no such thing. So it's a journey of self discovery. And I think a big part of it is that. And part of it also is your relationship with yourself, because there was a point when you were talking about the frustrating points and the points where you're hitting walls. There was a point where you had mentioned something that really struck me. And you said that there was a moment that you said to your body, "You're failing me."
Oh, yeah. I
And
struggle
that
with that a
moment,
lot. I did. That's what I'm saying, like, there were the ups and the downs because there were moments where,
mhm,
like, coming back from tennis, I felt like I could fly. I was like a kid again. It was awesome. I'd get a popsicle on the way home, like, it was great. And then there were those moments where it was just me and
mhm,
myself, and it's like I'm sure if you're listening to this and you've been through it, it's like that time of the month comes, you get your period, and you feel like, my body has failed what we're trying to do all over again. Like, here we go, another month, another month wasted. What did we do wrong? What can we do right? And then you're also feeling bad because you just got your period and there's that whole hormonal change. So I
right.
remember feeling that and struggling with that personally because I was just not used to my body failing me in that way. Not to say that I hadn't had other physical challenges. Like I was born with atrial flutter. So I would go to my cardiologist like twice a year. I was medicated. So I was very in tune with my body can do and cannot do from a very early age. But this was a whole nother rodeo. It wasn't cardiac, it was something else where it's like, how are we navigating this? And like, why do I feel like such a failure? And I'm sure we had ruled out that it wasn't my husband. The contributing factor, it really seemed to point to me because of the endometriosis, is what we all assumed. So, and based on the testing, so I also felt like I was failing him. And he was always very kind about it. He never ever said anything to that nature, but I know that he would see me struggle and feel like, like it's okay, it's totally fine. Like we'll just keep trying. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. But you feel like your body's failing not only you, but everyone around you.
Yeah, it's a really difficult, complex state of
Hmm.
being, because there's so many aspects to the psychological aspect of how it affects people going
Oh
through
yeah.
it. Because I think as humans, we always want to assign meaning to events or things that happen. And it's kind of our nature. And sometimes we can go ahead and assign those meanings, and those meanings can sometimes in our mind equate to like, oh, something's wrong
Yeah.
and something's not right with me. What I found really interesting about your journey is that you actually came around from that, and you came around, I think it was through the meditation, maybe doing things that made you more happy. You came around to a better relationship with your body.
Yes. That definitely improved because I realized that it wasn't so much like in the fail aspect. It was like, okay, you need something else from me. So the conversation internally with myself became, what do you need from me? What has to be adjusted and not fixed? I don't like to say fixed because there's nothing wrong or broken. It was
Yes, I love
just,
that.
yeah, I was like, I'm not broken. And there's
Yes.
nothing that necessarily needs to be fixed. We're just not hitting the goal right now. But what's the minor adjustment? It's like when you throw a ball in a basket, it's not broken. You just, okay, the minor adjustment just to make it into that basket. So when I would
Right.
meditate or like when I would have that moment alone in the shower and I'm just like by myself and I remember looking up into the ceiling and just thinking, okay, what else do you need from me? You know, are you happy? Do you feel good? Do we feel healthy? And kind of ask myself, I mean, it could be food. It's like, okay, well, we haven't eaten this since I was a kid. Let's just get that tomorrow. Let's have that for lunch tomorrow. Or I remember you had also suggested I get more sun. I realized how
Mhm.
little I was doing that. So
Yeah.
we would sit outside and get sun more. And I would take those moments also to be like, okay, well, what do we want to do today? Being a person that plans a lot, someone once taught me this. It's like, You can wake up and plan for everything on the weekend, right? When you get those days to yourself and be like, I have to do this and force it. Or you wake up and
Right.
ask yourself, what do we want to do today? And I realized my mom always said this that sometimes forcing, like you will know in life when you're forcing something. And it's
Mhm.
just, it takes so much more energy to do one thing forcefully than if sometimes you just go with the flow. And sometimes that flow doesn't go the way you want it to, or at the pace or timing of it. So I had to learn to kind of let go. I'm going to say let go because I'm sure you can call it many different things, but kind of go with the flow more and not try to force the agenda because we needed to take a step back. We, me, myself, and I, and
Mhm.
figure out what else is it that you need from me. Is it nutrition based? Is it less stress? Is it, what is it?
It's so interesting that you say that. First of all, I think that that is incredibly profound and insightful of you to look at it that way. And it's actually, you articulated something that I think a lot of people go through. I see it so much in the women that I've worked with. There are phases, and some of the phases in the beginning were fighting, it's all of us, me included, for many different parts of my life. It's kind of like insert subject, same
Hmm.
relationship though. It doesn't have to be necessarily fertility, it could be other things. But it's whenever we want something like really, really bad, something in our life,
Yes.
whatever that is. And at first we fight it. It's this relationship or kind of like journey that you have with that relationship until you finally, or your kind of like higher self realizes, oh, I just can't keep going like this.
Hmm.
It's exhausting me. And
Yep.
then there is a little bit of this surrender. And sometimes in between, kind of like sandwiched in, it could be a little bit of apathy. I just don't care anymore. I'm exhausted. Like I'm done. Kind of like that kind of thing. But
Hmm.
then it shifts into kind of like, wait, maybe I can do this. Like it could be more of a relationship. And then you start to work with, it's kind of like you're working in tandem with the circumstance. There's a relationship. And with that relationship, there's this connection. So the resistance, you're actually working against what is versus you get to this other state. And I see this over and over again on so many journeys that I get to witness, is that you get to this place of having that relationship with the circumstance, and that circumstance being really connected to a divine something. And I want to talk about that because for you, I was just blown away by some of the signs that you got from the
Yes.
spirit baby, and that this includes your mom. Your mom
Yes.
felt her. So I want to talk about all of it. Like, first of all, I want to talk about the steps before that. What do you think got you to, I mean, I know that you've always been intuitive, but what do you think got you to the place where you really started to make that connection? Because I feel like it almost seemed like there was a point of sort of separation where you were just focusing on like the to-dos, in the
Hmm.
beginning, and then like, what do I need to do? Which I personally think is not a bad thing. It's actually part of the process. I feel like that's one layer that you need, or step that you need to go through in order to get to this other part. So, what were the steps? What were the things that actually got you where you think that both your mom and you started to make that connection, spiritually speaking?
Yeah, that's kind of my favorite part because my husband always struggled to understand it, but my mom and I were definitely aligned. So the steps before, I think once that intuition was always like, it was something I couldn't force. It definitely just came when it came, and I always welcomed it. So always having an open heart for it. I think it's something you can't necessarily go looking for, but it will find you. I always thought about it that way. Once I started doing more of the things that made me happy, I think it released the reins on the structured part of the to do. I always see the to do as it's very structured, and then the intuition is more free. You can't add structure to that. You just kind of let it find you. And once I started doing everything and gave myself the boundary, the space to have moments to myself, and I'll give you an example. When I remember the first time that I felt or had a sign, we would always talk about it, and I remember telling you in the office, I was like, I kind of started feeling like a female presence, right? No signs or anything like that. I just felt like something very like bubbly and feminine kind of following me, for lack of a better term. And I remember telling you about it early on, and you're like, okay, that's a good sign. All right, let's, welcome it, right? And I always welcomed it. But there was one day I was in my backyard, and I remember I was like, okay, I'm gonna go get sun, like Michelle told me. I was in the backyard. The dog was out with my husband, like in another corner. I was like in a corner by myself, and I was up against the hedge, and I was fixing this branch. Like I had extended my hands, and I was fixing this branch. I was like out of order, right? It's my type A personality. Like one little corner is out of order. And when I felt something in my hand, and when I looked down, I was covered in ladybugs. It was something so odd because normally you'll see like one or two ladybugs, but when I tell you there's about 10 of them. And I looked at my both hands and I'm like, the only way I can describe it is like I felt surrounded at that moment by this one thing that I kept feeling, which was this feminine energy. And it's like, of course, a ladybug, so like dainty. And I love red. I'd done dashes of red throughout like our engagement session and our wedding. And it's very much something like his first car was like a red truck. And red was always like a synonymous color in our relationship. And I'm like, of course, like a little lady bug, and it's red. And my hands were just covered. And I remember telling him, and I'm like, look at this. And he kind of was like, oh, that's kind of funny and like odd, so many of them at a time. And I just let it go. But I love the fact you brought up my mom because I was definitely going to bring her up. So she, about a month after this dream, she had a dream, right? And she called me and she's like, not sure how to tell you this, but I'm just going to tell you. She had a dream where she sees this little girl at like a little coffee table, like short, little kid size. And she was in like a little dress, little black hair, kind of like what I look like as a child. And she was like coloring, totally distracted. And my mom says that she was just like doing her own thing, like looking down, totally distracted. And she's like, I felt like I was looking at your daughter. And I was like, well, can you tell her to hurry up and pay attention? Because being distracted like that totally sounds like her dad. Like we're all waiting for her, right? I told her like as jokingly, tell her to pay attention. We're all waiting for her. What is she doing? But it was like, I responded to her jokingly, but in my mind, I was like, she's not ready. The fact that she's not even looking at her, she's literally doing her own thing. Yeah, I was like, she's there, but she's not ready. That's how I interpret it. Because my mom was like, I really don't know what to make of it. You're kind of better at this than me. And things like that don't normally happen to my mom. They will once in a while, but I'm more intuitive like that than her. And I took it as she wasn't ready, which led me to the next thing.
Mm.
And I remember this was after the meditation.
Well, you reached out to me actually before you move on. You were talking, you actually sent me a message in the portal and said, my mom had a question for you. Or something about, do grandparents get signs from the spirit baby? Do you remember that?
Yes, she sent me with homework. She's like, next time you go see Michelle, please ask her because it was so vivid for her. And we talked about it. I remember you telling me about your daughter, the dream you had with your daughter,
Hmm.
which you mentioned in your book as well. And she felt great when I told her that. She was like, oh, okay, perfect. She came to me. She was like, she came to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, she's been around this
Oh,
whole
it's
time.
amazing.
I thought, like, she's been around this whole time. And it was interesting because I always felt like I said, it was like a very feminine energy. And like what I was gonna say, that the meditation opened the gateway to that. But there was one very last thing. It was after that dream. I think the dream was really what triggered it for me. I remember I was in the shower. Usually my little time to myself was either by the window in the front of my house where the sunlight comes in, or in the shower at the end of the day. And I would sit there, and it was a low point. It was not on the higher points of the journey, but I remember being like, wow, my mom saw her and I can feel her presence, but it's like something that you feel like a gust of wind, but you can't see and you can't grasp. And I remember just looking up at the ceiling and just being like, talking to her and saying, what do you need from me? Like, what do you need from me to come to this earth? Like, to come to me? Like, what do I have to do? The only word I can best use to describe it is that final surrender. Like, I was the type of person
Hmm.
that really needed to have control over things. I still kind of am, but it was the last thing where I was like, I don't have control over this. And it was the last surrender, I think, in the journey where this is on your time. Like, what do you need me to do? What is going to make you want to join us here? Like, I know you're here, but down here, physically on this earth, what do you need from me? And I remember that was like the last surrender, like the last thing where I was like, okay, whatever, what do you need from me? And I
Mhm.
take it looking back now, it was, I think for me, knowing my innermost self, it was a lesson I had to learn because since she's gotten here, I definitely learned
Mhm.
that you need to surrender. I'm just kidding. Like, I don't have control over this. This is where we're going with it, right? She's controlling the narrative. And it was kind of a lesson I had to learn. I was like, she was definitely teaching me a lesson. For it was kind of the beginning of like, you're gonna need this in motherhood. And it was that last little shred that I was holding on to. And it was definitely like a very, I think it's so personal within yourself that for me that was, I think, the last bit, the lesson I had to learn. Like everything I had applied, everything that you and I had talked about, we had been working together for months at that point. I had even told myself because I was at a low point here and I said, I looked at my friend, the one I mentioned in the beginning, I said, you know what, if we're not pregnant by the next month, let's just go to Mexico. Like that's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna go to Mexico and we're gonna have
Yeah,
margaritas and we're gonna have tacos.
and drink margaritas.
And we booked the trip. We did. We did book the
Mhm.
trip with the
I
full
remember.
intention. Like, that's it. If this month I'm not pregnant, next month we're going to Mexico. And we did it.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
I mean, the spirit baby had a totally different plan. Again, she controlled the narrative.
As usual. And I remember one other thing. One time you slept on the couch. I don't know if it was sometimes you'll take naps with the dog or you fall
Yeah,
asleep at night on the couch. I remember, do you know what I'm going to be talking about right now?
a
You know what
little
I'm
bit,
thinking
but
of?
you might remember better than me right now.
Okay, so you slept on the couch and it was towards the end of this journey.
Yeah.
It was when you started to get more communication with a baby and you always felt female energy and you fell asleep. You were like in this twilight state in between wake and sleep, and you heard like right in your ear, "Mommy,"
Yes.
and it was a girl's voice.
Yes. Wow, you just gave me goosebumps. You're so right. I kind of forgot about that. Wow. I
Mhm.
always say right now my brain is at 75% best.
Which is normal.
You're so right.
You're a new mom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was falling asleep. I was on the couch because sometimes, like, we don't agree on temperature. And our bed was really small. Our house was really small. So I went ahead and I went with the dog to the living room, and we had way more space. So I was cuddling with the dog. I was in and out. I was starting to fall asleep. And clear as day, like you said, I heard like a little girl's female voice say, Mommy. Yeah, I would say that happened about 3 months before. It was right before
Mhm.
I had that
Right.
surrender moment. Yeah.
Mhm.
Where I was like, okay,
Yeah.
you're here, but like, what do you want and need from me?
It's amazing, just incredible. But it is that surrender. It's so interesting how surrender, because the whole idea of really control and why we choose to control things is because we feel a lack of control. We
Oh, yeah.
feel a lack of strength or a lack of power. It's perspective and perception that we have a lack of power. We actually have more power we don't realize we have. But I believe personally, in order to access that power, you have to surrender.
Yes.
When you surrender, it's kind of like an oxymoron. You think that it's going to make you powerless, but in fact, it's going to do the exact opposite. That's where you find your power because then you realize that there's this greater power outside of us, that it's not just up to us. And that's when you tune into that
Mm-hmm.
and access it. You're able to access it through the portal of surrender. I want to actually, I just kind of thought about it now. It's like a portal. Surrender is a portal to that power. And I think that when you realize that, that's when you feel actually more empowered than you thought you would, before that. And I remember you got on the call. So we did our group calls
Mm-hmm.
and you got on the call. And that was when you had mentioned you were really excited because I think there was one call before. And then I don't know if it was the first one that we were on, but then you came on and then you said that your cyst shrunk.
Yes. Our first call.
And then I had another person on the call who she also had a similar circumstance. So she was just amazed by her story. And I think that that was one of the reasons why it was
Yes,
so powerful.
I remember
And
that.
then little did you know you were pregnant. And then I remember you were really touched by my daughter's story,
Yes. When I read your
reading
daughter's
it in the book.
story, yes, I started crying. I was sitting in the living room by myself and
Yeah.
I started crying because my mom had had that
Oh,
dream and I was like, wow, okay, this is very powerful. And that call, it was really funny. That first call that we had, I had just gotten the test results that the cyst had gotten smaller like a day or two before. So that week moved very fast. I got those test results.
yeah.
We had the call. I was like, guys, look, we have good news. It's got smaller. Everything's paying off. This is great. And I had gone in to do that ultrasound for those test results. So we did a full ultrasound. We did a transvaginal ultrasound. We didn't do a pelvic one, but usually they would use that other one to take a better look at the cyst. So I remember telling the tech, I turned to her and I didn't fully think through my humor, but I was like, is there anything else there? And she says,
Hmm.
no, should there be? And I'm like, no, we're trying to get pregnant. So, if you saw anything else, you could tell me. And she's like, no, I don't see anything else. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And I didn't make much else of it. Sat with my doctor, looked through it, was told this has got smaller. So I went home feeling happy, shared it with you guys about a day or two later. That Friday, I was home alone. My husband was on his last night shift, I believe, and I had no symptoms. It was just something that I was like brushing my teeth by myself. It was just me and the dog. And I look in the mirror, and at that point, I know most of you listening trying probably have you just stack up on pregnancy tests at this point. I had an unopened box, and I went into the linen cabinet and grabbed them. And I was like, I'm just going to take a pregnancy test. No symptoms or anything. I wasn't even late because technically it would have been like 4 more days to technically be late. And I kept brushing my teeth. I remember I looked down. I wasn't even recording on my phone or anything. I looked down and it was bright, like solid lines. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, I didn't expect that. I was like, one more. Let's just try one more. Let's go for the clear blue, right? Because it was the little paper strip ones. I'm like, let's go for the clear blue. And it was positive. And I was like, let me try one more. And then positive. And like this was at night. So I was like, okay, but then I can't tell anybody. I was like, he's not home yet. I'll wait till the morning. And in the morning I woke up, I took another test just to make sure. So it was like a for sure, the lines were there. But I had just been to the doctor and I had just talked to you guys. And the doctor hadn't seen anything on the ultrasound, but it was too soon. She was too little. So I had to confirm it with a blood test after that because again, I was going to Mexico the next week. Yeah.
Amazing.
So the spirit baby said, well, we're all going to Mexico.
Yeah, I'm coming with you.
Yeah, we're all going.
You bring me too.
Yeah.
And then what's really crazy is you popped into my mind. This happens a lot. I guess I don't technically call myself intuitive, but over time I've become. You popped into my mind. I don't know why. I was like, so when's they going to get pregnant? It was
Yeah.
just like kind of like it was a feeling that I had
Hmm.
around this time. And sometimes I'll almost find myself getting impatient. Sometimes when I get impatient with the people I'm working with, they get pregnant. It's almost like this kind of, I feel like it's time. I'm like, it's time for her to
Well,
get
do you
pregnant. It's just
remember
like,
the
yeah.
session we had before the group call, like our in-person acupuncture session? Do you remember what I asked you?
No,
I
remind me.
remember I was kind of on a low and I came in and at the end I was like, Michelle, what do you think? Do you think I should just like get pricing for IUI and IVF and see what like the next like do we keep going this way? Do we up it to, do IUI and IVF, which I had already talked to the doctors about. And I remember you were like conflicted. You were like, let's keep going a little further, right? And my OB had told me, you haven't been trying for that long, just keep going, make the appointment with the fertility doctor for, I think she said like 6 months from now, and keep going. And
Mhm.
then I talked to you and you were like, I think, keep going. And you had did something in that session that was so, I don't know if you even remember, but I remember. I went to lay down on the table and there was one of your art pieces behind me and there was light coming in through the window. Do you remember? And there were these little dots,
Mhm.
like a layered light dot. reflecting on your art, and you said, "Can I get your
Yes.
phone and take the photo?" And I forget what it was that you said. You're
Yes.
like, "This is very like it." Sometimes it's very symbolic or something. And you took my phone, you took the photo. I still have it, and I remembered that, and I was like,
Maybe we're going to let's use that photo for this. Maybe that's what we should use
"I'll
for
send it to
this.
you." And I kept
It'll only make sense for people if they are listening to this.
yes, and it was something like it was a part of the art that it was like near the hands. I'll send it to you. But yeah, it was like layered dots. And I remember that was in the beginning of the
Hmm.
session. End of the session, I asked you that, and you were like, I feel like we're doing well. I feel like let's keep going. Let's stay positive, but let's get the pricing anyways, right? So I had asked for all that
Yeah.
pricing. Fast forward to the following week when we had the group call. So I got the pricing back for IUI and IVF Thursday during the day. I tested positive Friday night. And I
Yep.
had just told my
It happens
husband,
a lot.
yeah, I had just told my husband, like, so this is what we're looking at, let's start financially planning on what we want to do and when we want to try this, if we do. And then Friday is like he probably didn't even get a chance to process the thought. I remember when I told him, he was like, are you joking right now? Like you just got an ultrasound, they didn't see anything. We just got pricing. I remember him saying like the positive tests were on the table and he's like, are you sure? Like, what am I looking at? And I'm like, no, I'm pregnant. He's like, are you sure? Because we were so mentally like just trying to run the marathon of like we're gonna keep going, right? This is gonna take a while longer, but she decided otherwise.
Yeah, it's what happens. And so what's crazy is that I kind of had a sense that I was going to hear from you soon. It just was a feeling. It was also like the things that you were saying, the signs. I'm like, I just feel like she's right around the corner. It
Right.
felt like that. And then you had sent me a message on the portal and you said, "Oh, I think I'm with, your friend.
Yes.
You were with your friend. I don't want to say the name. And so can you call us?" And I was with my daughter, the girl,
Yes.
the daughter that was in the book, the story that made you cry. Crazy enough, nothing's an accident. Everything kind of works out
Hmm.
how it's supposed to. And I call, and it's funny because my daughter hates when I call on the phone because she likes to listen to her music and it's disruptive. But she was very engaged in this conversation. And that was when you told me, and I knew that that's what you were going to tell me. And it was just random. I mean, not random, but amazingly, she was with me on the call. And
Hmm.
she, in some way, you really connected with her through the story. So it's just so wild how like, there's so much intelligence at play. And it's like, people's different stories interweave and connect with people. And this is why I find the podcasting so powerful because you get stories and there's people listening right now that are meant to hear the story right at this moment, just like you were meant to hear or to read the story right when you did. And
Hmm.
it just everything happens and unfolds, especially I feel like it happens more, synchronicity happens more when you surrender, when you get into the portal of surrender. And it was just pretty wild, but it was magical. It was absolutely magical.
And I always say it just felt like surrendering because I would say the month before, in full transparency, I was kind of losing it. I felt like I was losing myself, but it was losing the structure that I wanted to have. So I remember, like you said, I started going back. I was doing tennis and I was going to the gym in the morning, which I love to do. I love my gym and I love the friends I go with. And there's just one instructor, the gym owner. He's really like, he comes by, he's like, come on, like, let's, push harder. And I was like, please don't yell at me today. I'm gonna cry. And because I was so tapped out, I felt like the load I was carrying was so much. And he's like, yeah, okay. And he's like, let's go, like pick up heavier. And I just start crying. Michelle, I lost it at the gym. I was like, of all the
Oh.
places. And he looks at me and he's like, this ex MMA fighter. He looks at me, he's like, what's going on? And I was like, I'm trying to get pregnant and nothing's working. And he's like,
Mhm.
you're a mentally strong girl, like, but look what's happening, you gotta let it go. And he said, you gotta get it, you gotta give it to God. You gotta let it go. You gotta let it go and be here for yourself and try to be happy while you're here. And it's hard. He's like, I know it's hard. There's a lot of girls in this gym that have also gone through it. And then you see them come with the stroller like at the 6 a.m. class. So I broke down at the gym. I had my regular cardiologist appointment, which, mind you, this cardiologist has seen me since my mom was 6 months pregnant with me. And I just turned 35. I
Mhm.
went to him the day before yesterday, actually, with the baby. So He's like an uncle at this point.
Oh,
And I
wow.
go for my regular checkup and I break down there too. And he's like, what's going on? You know, why are you breaking down
Mhm,
crying? And I remember he said, have your husband call me. Right. I was like, I just don't know what the next step is. Like,
mhm,
I don't know what to do. And he has two girls of his own. And I remember he's like, I've seen all sorts of babies because he's pediatric, but he still has me as a patient. And he's great. And
mhm,
he talked to me like a dad. Right. And there was another
mhm.
place I also broke down. I didn't break down at tennis, but I there was another place also I was just like that last month I was so emotional. And I felt like
Mhm.
then came that moment in the shower. I was like, I need to just like the surrender moment. Because I think I was
Yeah.
crying because I was holding on to so much. It was so much. And I think her lesson to me was like, you don't need to hold on to that. You gotta let it
Wow.
go.
And it's almost like you had a cleanse,
Yeah.
like a strong release. And it's like shortly after that release where you like acknowledge how you felt and you really like you faced it.
Yeah.
That's when the transformation happened.
Yeah. That last month on a week by week basis was really intense because I can tell you the week alone where like I talked to you guys, I saw the
Wow.
doctor, then I tested positive, and it was like every week was a lot. It was very
Yeah.
emotionally heavy, but it was great and wonderful, and it needed to happen the way it needed to happen. When I look back at it
Amazing.
now, well,
And
and
now you have your girl.
yes, so again, she is something else. My pregnancy was again, it was a lesson learned because my pregnancy, she was great. I struggled a little bit more. So we were monitoring me for preeclampsia pretty early on. And we had
Mhm,
a team of doctors. So I had my doctor, I had two cardiologists, I had the maternal fetal specialist on board as well. We were all monitoring week by week. I
mhm,
actually went to the OBER two times, if not three, if I remember, during the pregnancy for high blood pressure. So it wasn't easy. But that
mhm,
surrendering taught me it's like we're just gonna go with it. And I would go to my appointment on
mhm,
Friday and be like, we might be having a baby today, we might not. So
mhm,
it helped me a lot with the pregnancy. And then she decided, well, she didn't, but the team decided to either induce or have a C-section at 37 weeks. So I ended up having her
mhm,
via C-section 37 weeks and a day because I couldn't decide what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to
mhm.
be induced or have a C-section, but based on all of my health markers. We decided C-section was safer and it was great. The recovery went really well. She did really well. And I remember the moment I saw her, it was like, that's a little face that's, I've been carrying this whole time, but it also felt like I've known you since forever.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I remember
Incredible.
looking at my husband and I was like, I will pick her over you every single time in every lifetime. Like I like that mother bear. It was like instinctually just happened. And I was still
Mhm.
in the operating room and just instinctually I was like, she's mine. That's mine.
That's so cute. And you sent me pictures of her.
Yes.
And I thought it was so cute. So cute. And then there was one that was so funny because you always had a little spice. You always
Yes.
told me, I never fully saw that, but I know what you mean. Like it's like that strong spirited personality. You're like, you always told me that you felt that way and
Hmm.
that you had that spice. And there was a picture of her.
She
And
let
you're
us
like, she
know.
has that. And there's this look she was giving.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is perfect.
Yeah, and it's funny because
It
that
was
picture
so
was
cute.
actually there was a longer video where it wasn't just an instant. Like she was looking at us like the customer service here sucks. Like that was her little personality. Like the milk is taking
That's
forever. Like
amazing.
dad is heating up the milk. The customer service here, she's
Yeah.
definitely the best of both of us. She's really smiley like him, and then she has that spice from me, and everything comes
Mhm.
around in life. I definitely look at my mom and I'm like, wow, how did you survive such a spicy child? And now
Yes.
my mom is like,
Yep.
yeah, that definitely, like, we're angry crying now. So she definitely gets a bit of that from me
Yeah.
because he's not like that. And she really has taught me that surrendering lesson was, I'm still learning. I'm still learning. When I
Yeah.
think I got it together, everything's planned. And she's like, yeah, you think we're going to go to the park? Outfit change.
Yeah, totally. It's a lifelong process. It's a lifelong practice. I mean, it really is. So, wow, this is your story is incredible and not just your story, but also your perspective and how you can kind of go back and look at it in such a poetic way, because people can look at things, there's circumstances happen and everybody can perceive it differently,
Mhm.
and some people look at it as more layered and in depth and having meaning. And I love the way you tell stories. I really think that it's incredibly inspiring.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much for opening up and sharing your incredible story. I'm sure there's so many people listening to this that may actually have this episode on repeat for literally like moments where they feel down, just to get some hope. So thank you for providing that for the community.
Thank you. I've definitely been there. The other episodes helped me significantly. So I just, I've been there. I understand, and it's a long journey, but it's definitely worth it.
Thank you. So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can find me on my website at www.michelleorovitz.com. You could also reach out to me on Instagram, and I love getting DMs from my listeners. My handle is at The Wholesome Lotus Fertility. I thank you so much for tuning in today, and I hope you have a beautiful day.